We're live. We're live. We're live again. Hi, everybody. Welcome again to the show. I know a lot of kings and queens and royal family tend to like to watch this show as their favourite show on the YouTube.
And I know a lot of queens too, Greg.
Actually, I do know a few royals that do watch the programme, actually, I was told. But we're going to be doing, tonight we're going to be talking about seances and things that were held with throughout history with the royal families of the world, and kings and queens and emperors who've turned to mediums, turned to prophets, turned to seers to get some ideas about the future of their realm and things like that, and communicate with the dead. So, welcome to the Craig and Jane Show. Well, hi again, folks. So, royalty. They always have had an interest, surprisingly. When you start looking up how many people have from royal heritage have been interested in the sort of thing we do, it's pretty incredible, actually, because it goes right the way back through history. I did a bit of research on it, and I looked at things like Conan Doyle's History of Spiritualism and things like that. And there's so many fascinating accounts of royal people that have a few hellos, agility bits on again, a few royal families of the world that have been very interested in mediumship and so forth. You would have thought it would become mainstream a lot earlier than it did, really. And I think tonight we're going to have a look at some of the we're going to highlight a few of the sort of stories from the history. I've got a few headlined already here that we'll go through, Jane. But is any before we start that took your interest of people that...
I haven't seen your notes. I just wrote mine down.
Yeah.
And because I'm quite intrigued with how it all began. And we have, I won't say who it is, but we have actually been in a royal household, and we actually experienced phenomena that's happened and heard spirit voices that's associated with a royal member in Hampshire.
Yeah. I know that some royal people do actually watch this show, actually, not from the British royal family, I'm sure they do, but apparently some of the disenfranchised royals that have been chucked out of their countries actually watch the programme, because they made us predictions about that. But probably I better not say who and what that is, but that we do actually get that. But there's so many people. I mean, I made a list of a few here that was you wouldn't even think about, actually. Catherine de Medici, for example. You know, I mean, she was the wife of Henry III, wasn't she? Catherine de Medici. She likes astrology and all things like that, you know, under the times when the Pope and everything was controlling everything. King Ludwig II of Bavaria, of all people, you know. I mean, I'm just going through the list. Queen Maria of Romania, she was very keen, interested in the occult and all sorts of spiritualism and mediumship and things like that. The Romanovs, which we'll do later on.
Yes, well, I got quite a list, so...
Emperor Napoleon III of France. He was the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. I mean, it went on and on. I mean, spiritualism too, when it boomed. The spiritualists were going through all over Europe, giving demonstrations of mediumship, and physical mediumship was demonstrated in the royal households, and they all knew each other, of course, didn't they? The Romanovs knew the
royal family.
They knew the
they're cousins, that's why.
Spanish royal family, and they were all interbred. So I thought the first one, if we start off with the first one, let's go right back. One of the most famous oracles, which tells the future of the world,
Delphi,
was back in the times of the ancient Greeks. And I thought we'd look, and it's always fascinated me, the ancient Oracle of Apollo at Delphi. We nearly went there, Jane, didn't we? It got cancelled. We had a holiday plan.
It was
there.
COVID
time, and that's where we'd have been.
Yes,
right up in those beautiful mountains there, and that's part of the remains of what was the Delphi Oracle, which was massive. I mean, it was a huge, great extent. Vast amounts of wealth went into Delphi at its time. You know, it was one of the most sacred places on earth, the Temple of Apollo in Delphi. And it was considered the navel of the earth there, you know, the Greeks believed, the centre of the world. And the oracle used to be told by what's called the Pythia, which comes where we get the word Python from.
Oh, that's with computers.
Well, yeah, Python. You know about Python programming?
I know more than I let on, young man.
Anyway, the Pythia, which is the snakes, right? The snake-like people. And they used to go into these strange trances, the Pythia did. And they would breathe in the vapours. They reckoned there was vapours that came up through the earth, perhaps volcanic vapours or something. But they're in a sort of pretty high type hallucinogenic sort of state, you know.
That looks a bit like me, Craig, with dark hair.
Yeah, imagine reading with her, right? And of course, it was all controlled by the priests, because like you see in that picture, the priests made sure that, you know, we interpreted it right, and they were well into making money out of the oracle and things like that, you know. And I think it was a fascinating world. Sadhguru, who's out there, he said that they found a Shiva Lingam there.
Oh, really?
Know? Yeah, which makes me wonder, is it all tied up with some international spiritual thing? And if you think about Python too, are we thinking about the snake people again?
Oh, yes,
you know?
and the underworld.
I mean, it makes you think, where do they getting all this knowledge from and things like that? You know, it was I think quite interesting, all that, you know, because I'm interested in the idea of the Naga and the things like we found in
well, we've
India.
actually experienced the Naga, haven't we?
Well, we saw the trance work with the Naga, yeah, and that's it. So lots of people came to it. One of the last ones that came to it was Nero, Emperor Nero. And you imagine if we were doing a reading for someone, when Nero came, Nero killed his mum, didn't he?
Not the only thing he done.
And a lot more. But when Nero approached the oracle, the Pythia screamed at him that he's a mother killer, right? Nero didn't like it, so he had the seer buried alive. So if you don't get it right, you get buried alive in those days. You know, nowadays we just get a lot of trolls, but we get buried alive. You know. So up there in those amazing mountains up in ancient Greece, you know, there was all those things going on there. You know, they had there was a really interesting story about what happened down there in about 560 BC. A king went to see the oracle, King Croesus. So I don't know if that means like Croatia. I don't know if the word Croatia came from that. I'm not sure. There's King Croesus of Lydia, his name is. Odd-looking sort of chap. But he was going to go to war with the Persians. And he wanted to know if he would win the battle, of course, you know. So he went to the oracle, and it talked to him with a bit of a forked tongue, actually, because it said, if you go to war with the Persians, a great kingdom will be destroyed. He thought, it sounds pretty promising, that does. And then, of course, he said, well, okay, and what if it's not my kingdom? So he thought, okay, so how long will I reign then? And the answer was, when a mule, you will reign until a mule is a king of Persia. And he thought, no way is a mule going to rule Persia, so I'm bound to win this. I'm bound to be all right. But of course it backfired on him, because he went to war and a great kingdom did fall. It was his own kingdom that fell. And actually the king of Persia was actually his mother and his father were of different races. One was from Media and one was from Persia. So that in those days would have been considered a mongrel. Right? I know, terrible, un-PC, but that's what those days they thought. You know, so it was a mule, they considered it. So the prophecy came true in both ways. So quite often people quote this thing from there to say that actually what happened there, you know, you've got to be careful how you interpret the oracle, how you interpret the predictions, because the oracle may say one thing and it can mean something else. You've ever had that in your readings, Jane? I mean, you say one thing and it comes out in a different form to what you anticipate.
No, not really, because when I've got the person in front of me, my vision's very clear and I see things, and I call it clarity I have with it, because it's like a psychic TV screen and it just flows.
Yeah, we don't go breathing out of the rocks on the tripod with all the airs. Because I was thinking about digging a hole in the back garden and getting some of the volcanic ash coming up.
I might bury you in it yet.
So I mean Alexander the Great also went to the oracle and
do water scribing though? in their porter because I thought there's a thing called the fortune where they actually looked in water and they could see the future, and I think that was part of that as well.
I don't know, scrying. This would have been, I suppose it would have been a form of type of scrying. I don't know. The seers of the Pythia, as it were. And there was a lot of other, they had a lot of influence too, because, as happens, you get the seers there, but then you also get the people that control the seers, and that huge amounts of money went through Delphi, and often it was used sometimes. The Sibyl which would be another oracle, but the Sibyl had said something to stop the wars. We're going to stop the war. Say the Sibyl said something. So these things happened quite a lot, and even a lot of great Greek philosophers went to see the Oracle of Delphi too. It was there a long time, right from the Greek times, right the way through to the Roman times.
What intrigued us, we watched the Viking programme, and they had a seer there, and he was quite dark, and because he said the vision he saw was horrible snakes and that, he didn't like it, so he killed him.
Yeah, well, that's what Nero did. He didn't like the prophecy that he got. So he had her buried alive, So I think that's not a bad thing, If you don't, psychic readings, not your money back. If you don't like it, kill the seer.
Gosh.
So I think that's quite an interesting one. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Delphi or you've got any comments about Delphi. Obviously, we used to have the Delphi chat rooms on the website years ago, and we also had the, Delphi was quite is still also one of the tiers in the patrons, and thank you patrons again, because so you know where that Delphi business comes from if you're one of the patrons and you're a Delphi subscriber. So there's loads of people, isn't there? I was going to talk about next was Queen Elizabeth, but Queen Elizabeth I.
Yes, Queen Elizabeth I.
Because she was really quite interested. Well, all the royal lineages were, but she was a fascinating character. I was kind of, good dress sense she had, of course. They often thought she was a man. Actually, a lot of people with Elizabeth I, because she was a very unusual sort of character.
Well, she's a woman, but she thought like a man and she battled like a man. So she's quite a strong woman.
But she really did believe in her seers.
Yes, well, the thing is, in those days, they depended upon a lot of people, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, the big name with her was John Dee. Now, he's one of the most significant figures in Elizabethan court. And he did a lot of work with the occult, John Dee did. He was a mathematician, he was an astronomer, he was an astrologer, he was an occultist.
Well, yeah, because in those days astrology would have been a big part, and also he would have scribed on water, another one that would go into a semi-trance and see visions in water.
Yeah, he did that type of thing. He was our advisor. Astrological things he did a lot of scientific interests and alchemy he was involved as well. And he cast her horoscopes for Elizabeth and gave a lot of counsel about things. He predicted her coronation date, I believe. I think John Dee was considered he was actually chosen to choose the auspicious date for Elizabeth's coronation. He chose January the 15th, 1559, because the astrology and also the numerology calculations for that date suggested a prosperous reign.
Christine said, Jane, when you read for me, you said I had a past life connection with Delphi. Interesting. You certainly did, Christina.
But we saw do you remember, we went to an exhibition once, didn't we, of John Dee. It was all about weird stuff they had there. And they had John Dee's scrying mirror.
Yes.
Right.
That was in a museum.
Through a mirror darkly. There's a couple apparently. There's one in the Science Museum and there's another one in the British Museum. I don't know which one we'd seen. There must have been a number of them. But I remember looking into it. We sat there and I sat and looked into this thing for a little while. I was just really taken by it. It really did feel
food, Craig?
No, I didn't see food in there. I saw terrible things. I saw terrible things. No, I there was definitely a real energy to it. A real kind of an occult sort of energy. It was made from obsidian, I think. Obsidian stone, black polished stone. That's how they would make their mirrors, And
Well, they used to do that and hold a candle in front of it, and because you get transfiguration, because the imagery of the candle would shadow over your face, and you would see the person you're either going to marry in the future or past life things. That's what they used to do.
Yeah, there was lots of fascinating stuff with it. I don't know where he studied, actually, John Dee. I don't know where we would have.
Well, he's probably
studied.
he's probably a man that was self-taught. I should have thought.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought. Wouldn't have been in the church.
No, he's self-taught, because when they got an interest, they always try to make gold and different things. So would study the things himself.
I don't know. I don't know whether, for example, Oxford and that were around at that stage, that far back. And he was. He also was very much into things like amulets and things like this, and he caught lots of interesting stuff with magic. He wrote a lot of books on magic and things like that. I also, there was the story, I don't know the full details of it, but there was a really fascinating story that I read about Elizabeth I, because she believed in what's called a doppelganger.
Yes.
Which is we have a double.
Yes, I know what it means.
A lot of people say that COVID's all about making clones of us all, but she was way ahead of her time in that way. That she had a doppelganger, and there was a superstition that if you saw your doppelganger, it would be a premonition of your death. And just before Queen Elizabeth I died, she saw her doppelganger.
I see a little cross appeared upon your head then. They've got you marked,
That's
Craig.
the screen flashing. The people watching won't see that.
I'm
No.
teasing.
Yeah. So she was quite an interesting one, I think, don't you?
I think she's interesting, but she was known as the Virgin Queen because she suddenly had this image of putting all this white powder, which might have had a bit of arsenic in it, over her face because she believed she had such a power. She's quite a masculine woman, really. And she fell in love with, I forget what his name was, but then she changed because he married somebody. And then from that point on, she announced that she was the Virgin Queen, carried in white, like a ghostly figure.
John Dee as well used to talk about this language of the angels.
Oh, yes.
And now I think it was, I've forgotten the name of it now. I think it was called something like Erewhon or something like that.
In Old English.
You can correct me, Bill.
Wasn't it Old English and Hebrew?
It was they were all into
between
the idea,
Old English and Hebrew.
Yeah, they were all into this idea that language had a special meaning.
Yeah, it probably did.
Hence things like the biblical Bible code and thing, which is an interesting concept in modern times, come up really. But the Bible held certain tricks and messages in it. Some of the texts that people like John Dee wrote are supposed to have hidden messages in them.
But didn't they used to open a Bible and then look at a text and close it? Yes.
Yeah, and and they used to use Virgil, who also went to the Delphic Oracle. He jumping back one there, but he went. Virgil, I believe, went to the Delphic Oracle. So in his book, they say that you open Virgil and it'll give you a prophecy. So is that something to do with the Delphi again? So sometimes in the books and in the languages, there's hidden things. I mean, even much later years, Newton got fascinated by numerology and numbers and language and how it all ties together. And even the popes did too. Dee went to Cambridge Trinity College. Okay, he didn't go to Oxford, he went to Cambridge. Thank you for checking that out. And also, any facts you guys want to throw in, it's great, because Jane and I do our research, of course. But, there's lots of guys out there that are really sort of deeply into these things, and we're keen for your contribution. So thanks for that. That's quite interesting. So he's quite an interesting guy, I think.
Well,
John
I think
Dee.
in that century
he fascinated me.
They did go on magic numbers, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean they used to also the popes were into this. Now I can't remember his name. Eugene, I think Eugene or something, the first or third or something like that. But he used to he was well into numerology, and would have the magic squares made up. Right. They were supposed to be lucky. There's even one in that one we saw in Seville on the Familiar Church, where they got the magic squares put up as a reference, perhaps, to those old popes that believed in the magic of numbers. And someone like Dee, for example, would been employed with his numerology skills. It's something we completely ignore nowadays, really. But even the vibration of your name has a number significance to it, and you'll have a numerology connection for what your name means. And if you change your name by marriage, your numerology will change as well, because you've taken on a new name, so you get a new name vibration. So that was so. I think Elizabeth I was quite an interesting one, wasn't she? She's an interesting woman. Now, one that I know you like quite a lot, Jane, is the Romanovs.
Well, I like the Tsarine, she would have been called, Alexander, and I was quite interested in her because she had a healer that helped her, Rasputin, with Alex, her son, because he was a haemophiliac, and he seemed to cure this boy, and she had great confidence in him. And that, but in reality, he was an old drunk. In reality,
yeah.
And but the women were absolutely fascinated by him. I wonder why, but he had these magnetic eyes and that. And I believe going towards the end of his life, he had people tried to kill him because they saw him threatening. And I think he had 6 bullets shot at him, but he still survived, didn't he?
Well, they reckon, he had a massive influence upon the Romanovs because the child there had haemophilia, wouldn't stop bleeding. They didn't understand what that was all about, did they? I don't know how you'd stop bleeding using herbs and spices and things and healing or anything in those days. We've got some more bits coming up.
Well, he would have to concentrate on the thinning of the blood, you see.
He might have known a blood clotting agent.
Yeah, and he studied all that, and he was quite a very strong healer and everything.
And they a lot of times they tried to poison him with cyanide.
Yes. And
he could take huge doses of cyanide because his body had actually become immune to cyanide. I mean, I'm surprised that you can do that, but they reckon that he became immune to cyanide.
Well, they tried to poison him, giving him apples and things.
Yeah.
And,
so there's another psychic or a seer, because he had quite a lot of I think he had a kind of hypnotic power.
Yes,
didn't he?
He did. You look at the eyes; they're like psychic eyes, aren't they?
Yeah, he's got a sort of
a presence
that one picture,
with him.
You can see he's projecting his energy there, isn't he? And you can see how Empress Alexandra Ferodrovna, I can't remember her surname. Empress Alexandra would have been hypnotised by his presence.
Tsarine, Craig.
I mean, she looks quite a susceptible sort of person, really, don't you? She looks, when you look at her eyes, a lovely photograph actually, but when you look at her eyes, she looks, you can see haunted feel in her eyes, can't you? She almost looks like she's come from the other side.
Well, she really wanted to help her son, didn't she? Because the other children were daughters, so he was the youngest. So, and because she's related to one of the Queen's cousins, isn't she?
Well,
Prince Michael of Kent.
Yeah, but the Romanovs used to come over to the Isle of Wight. And what's the name of it?
Queen Victoria.
Yeah,
Osborne House.
Osborne House. I couldn't think for a minute. But they used to come over to Osborne House. And they would have met the mediums that Queen Victoria was very interested in.
I'm going to do that next one.
What, Queen Victoria?
Yes.
Yeah, that's all right. Because
is that all right?
Yeah, we're going to come to Queen Victoria next, and we can talk about some of those. And so all these royal families were very interested, and the mediums used to move from one to another. Oh, look at that,
Craig. Rasputin's
penis is in a jar.
I was going to say private member.
Private members club.
That's what I was going to say. Private member. You spoiled it.
Yeah.
It's pickled.
You got any interesting facts, guys? Bung them up. You could go and have a search for him.
He must be. And also, I believe that Errol Flynn was that way inclined as well.
Yeah. Rasputin was a mesmerist. Yeah, they called him mesmerist in those days, Gemma. You're right. But that's hypnotism. And mesmerism was a really fascinating thing. So they all believed it was all linked up with electricity and all sorts of something. Yeah. He also had psychic eyes. They also believed in phrenology and things like that.
Yes.
And that was all big at that time amongst that whole circle of Romanovs and the
He was
and the rest of
quite religious as well on one aspect, because he followed the path of being a monk, but he did like to drink, and he did like the women.
Yeah, lovely old photograph. I think it's a Getty photograph, so I ought to sort of give it a credit because I didn't know where it came from. I just have to say that, I think, if it was. But but a fascinating character, isn't he? A fascinating. You can tell a lot from a person's eyes.
You can.
And you look at his eyes and you compare it to Queen Alexandra's eyes, and they're two different type of people, aren't they? Too much incest with the royalties. There was. In all the royal families, the Spanish royal family too. You can look at the pictures of Goya and Velasquez, and you'll see, is it Goya or Velasquez or both? But you'll see that some of the children in there look quite, they look like they're not quite human, where there's so much inbreeding been going on in the royal families, and a lot of illness going through, and maybe some of those illnesses that they had. In the Russian royal family, and I wonder, did Rasputin see the coming revolution? And did these seers that they see this? We should have helped the Romanovs when they sought our help during the Bolshevik uprising.
They didn't, did they? The royal family, as you said, they went to the Isle of Wight and they sent them back. Actually, sending them back to their death. Yeah,
I think they did. I mean, Queen Victoria turned her back on it all because they didn't want to get involved. I seem to remember. I don't know the full ins and outs of that story, but. Yes, so there we go, and there she is up there. There's our dear Queen Victoria up there, who we'll come to next, because I think she was a fascinating character and deeply interested.
I've got a little nugget here.
You've got a few nuggets.
Throughout history, royals who have explored Eastern religions, astrology, and the spirit world, and one famous one was Queen Victoria. When Prince Albert died, a 13-year-old medium called Robert Lees delivered a message from Albert to Queen Victoria in which he called her by a pet name, known only to her and her dead husband. Queen Victoria was delighted, and she sent her trusted servants to investigate the young medium. After impressing Queen Victoria, he was invited to visit Queen Victoria at Buckingham Palace several times, where the young medium sounded just like Prince Albert in trance. As a 13-year-old, Robert Lee didn't want to be living as a resident in Buckingham Palace. He then suggested an alternative medium called John Brown. For more than 30 years, Brown was Queen Victoria's medium.
Yeah, I mean, John Lees, we got a picture of him actually, I think, somewhere. Robert James Lees. We came up the other week. Do you remember when we did the...
Yes.
Remember we did Jack the Ripper?
Oh, yes.
And he did that with Queen Victoria when he was 13 years old.
That's right.
13 years old. But there's also been quite a few question marks put round him, actually, because the records are a bit dodgy. There's not many records of it. Some people say that some of the letters, the only record they've got is that Robert Lees was given a book. Robert Lees sent Queen Victoria a book. And that's the only thing they really can prove that he was there. They wonder whether some of that was hearsay. Now, that's because the press at the time would go for these people like they do nowadays, But there's Queen Victoria, she loved her family. Look at her, sentimentalised version of the family. But when you see a picture of Queen Victoria later, when she's with John Brown, who was, you see a completely different view of what she looks like, She was like a beautiful, idyllic family picture, sort of Victorian sentimentality. And if we have a look now at the photo of John Brown as well, if we got that one there. There we go. Look at the difference.
Yes, but then
at the difference.
Yes, but she's an older woman there, and that John Brown there became like a companion to her, because she really felt she was closely connected to Prince Albert, and it's like as if he was still living in her mind and
I see
around
that link
her.
there come up about the haemophilia link within the royal family there too. That was interesting.
Well,
Thanks for your comments, guys. Keep putting them up.
There's lots of illnesses through the royal family, and the Queen Mother, I believe she had two cousins that were hidden away that never taught, and they thought they put them in an asylum, didn't they? And it only came to light when Princess Margaret found out that she actually had 2 cousins, and I believe she visited them.
Yeah. Of course, John Brown was played in the film by Billy Connolly, wasn't he?
Yeah, he played a good part.
And he played a very good part in that, actually. And she was kind of the question mark at the time, just like we get royal scandals now. He was a medium. It was a big thing that he was a medium. That's how she got to know him. Now, there was the question mark over the whole thing as well. What was there something going on between Victoria and John Brown? Was he a kind of a consort in a much more of a different way?
When she passed, wasn't there a ring from John Brown, if I remember rightly? And she had a thing about myrtle, which is grown, the royal family, even the bouquets, and that was placed in a coffin, and some letters from John Brown.
Yeah. Well, we went to Osborne House.
That's why I know.
I should have brought the clip, actually, because I've got a clip of when we went to Osborne House. But we went to where Victoria died, didn't we? She's the room where she died in. She died in Osborne House, I think they said, didn't they? So we went back there to die. And that's when most of the seances went on, and the stuff with John Brown. She went to Osborne House. She's open to the public now. It's not part of the royal.
Well, you can actually feel the energy there as well, because she had a fascination with India, very much mystical things.
Yeah.
Though she never ever went to India,
No.
Though she had Indian servants, and that she was fascinated. Like I say, all through the royal family, they have a fascination with India.
And she adopted a sort of an Indian type of boy there too.
Well,
I think there was a movie made about that.
Well, he was a servant, and he actually lived in the lodge that Prince Harry and Meghan Myrtle were given by the Queen, which now they're trying to get Prince Andrew in.
Oh, right. He's
and that's
halfway on the other side already, isn't he?
And it was the first Prince of Wales, when Queen Victoria died. He hooked him out that place and destroyed every letter that Queen Victoria had written to a trusted servant.
Oh, right, yes.
And burnt him out. Yeah, there's a scandal there.
Yeah, sad, isn't it?
It's very sad.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose, everybody goes through grief in different ways, don't they? And it's a great level of death, I suppose, isn't it?
Now,
what she went from
right,
to.
Where you're saying about the Queen Mum had a seance to contact George V, she did. And we've actually been to Broadland's house, where they did have seances there.
Oh yeah, in Broadland there was apparently, wasn't
Broadlands,
there?
Not Broadmoor. Broadlands.
I didn't say Broadmoor. Don't tell people about Broadmoor. I don't want people to know about me and Broadmoor. Yeah, there was another one, actually, another lesser known one, which I've only just really found out about today, because there was another medium called Georgina Eagle, right? Mm-hmm. And she was a well-known medium at the time. I mean, there was a lot of mediums at the time. This photograph was supposed to have been taken. Well, I'm not 100% sure I've got this right, because I found it from a website that talked about it. But this was actually taken at a séance with Georgina Eagle, and she was another well-known medium at the time. I needed to do a bit more research on her, really. But apparently she got a lot of messages from Albert again. He's with Albert there, but they used to go he got interested in it in advance of his death, so they were already interested in the whole idea of clairvoyance.
Well, they all used to have seances and parlours, didn't they?
Yeah.
In Lincoln House. Why has she got her arm round his shoulder, though, if he's a prince?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure the context of the photographs. The photograph I'm a little bit unsure of, but I do know this all happened, because it was documented. It was supposed to have happened in 1846, and Queen Victoria was so impressed by her clairvoyance, which I presume was at the same time, 1846, I don't know whether he'd have been alive or dead by then, but she gave a watch to her, a sort of a
memento,
as a watch, and actually engraved on the back, she said, "For your extraordinary clairvoyance."
Oh,
the Queen engraved, a little bit better than getting a milk bottle from Diana. I mean, it actually had it engraved on the back of the watch, and that watch was given to this Society of Psychical Studies. I forgot the name for a minute, in London. And apparently it was stolen in 1963, sadly enough. So the watch doesn't exist anymore. A lot of people have sort of again jumped onto it and say, oh, it never really happened. The watch was a fake. It didn't really happen at all. But the skeptics do tend to like to do that. But Victoria was very deeply interested in spiritualism. And it was part of the thing that blew it all up at the time. That's why it became such a huge public interest in it at the time. And it exploded even more with the First World War, when people were losing their young children on the...
Right, Jules say, do you think the King and the late Queen have, I suppose you mean psychic spiritual advisors? Well, the Queen had a very strong faith in the church, so I really don't know about that.
I don't think Queen Elizabeth...
No, I don't think
I've
Queen
heard
Elizabeth...
no
Wait a minute,
rumours of
Craig,
that.
you're always interrupting. I don't think the Queen did, but the King is very interested. He had a spiritual advisor, what was South African, Van something, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, it was more of a spiritual advisor.
Yeah,
that South African
he definitely
guy.
did. And
Van
he's
something, I
always
remember
been
his name.
interested in spirituality and symbolism, so he has a very strong belief. But I don't actually know he would go to a psychic, because a psychic would have to sign a confidentiality form. This is why I'm very suspect when some of them say that they were Princess Diana's mediums, because she'd been so busy. And I know for a fact she contacted 350 psychics on the lines, didn't she?
Well, we don't know quite how many, but she used to ring our phone lines when we had them. I was tied in. Those that remember my website from a long while ago, we don't have the phone lines on there nowadays, but we had various mediums working on there, and we can't prove it in every case, but there was a lot of calls from Princess Diana to the lines.
But Princess Diana's medium, who was well known, was Rita Rogers, and she was a gypsy, a very good person, and Diana used to visit her by helicopter in a field, and she gave Rita Rogers a gold necklace, and she used to like her Crown Derby, and given things like that, and that is proven. And Craig and I actually travelled with the Royal Secretary and Correspondent to Dodie's flat and to New York, didn't we, Craig?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, Rita Rogers. I mean, Diana made a point, because I think it was when she was going, I don't know which one she was going out with at the time, but the newspapers would question, is Diana going to get married again? Is she going to get married again? So she thought, well, let's let them see me go and see this Rita Rogers, the clairvoyant, and she arrived in her house by helicopter.
That's
so of course you've
right.
got the helicopter picture all over the front page of the Sun, I remember at the time, and the headline saying something to the effect of, is Diana planning to get married? And of course, so from her point of view, she was really playing the press with these things, because if a person quite often goes to see a clairvoyant, if they're thinking about their future, often people go to see clairvoyants about their love life and things like that. And Diana was actually genuinely interested in the topic, not just, she used that as a bit of a PR stunt, I think, with Rita Rogers. And you've got to give it to Rita Rogers. I always felt that she was pretty humble with it, and she never did sort of, as far as I'm aware, unless tell me wrong if I'm not, but I don't think she ever sort of spilled the beans on what was said.
No,
by
she
her,
wouldn't,
Diana.
because you sign a confidentiality. It doesn't mean because some medium say I was Princess Diana's clairvoyant, they seem to think it gives them credibility, in my view, but it would be very private.
I think Rita Rogers was good clairvoyant.
Yeah,
in that
and it would
she
be
kept
very
her word,
private,
didn't she?
yes.
She might have had to sign the Secrets Act, but I doubt it. I think she
No,
was...
they do have to sign it,
well,
Craig.
Diana
They do.
used to ring all sorts of people, so they couldn't keep tabs on her. That's what they didn't like. MI5 and MI5 or 6 would have been going haywire with
Yes.
trying to keep her under control. Like when she gave that Romanov thing to that lady that I did the mediumship for Diana.
Angela says, do you think anyone will claim to hear from our late Queen Elizabeth and beyond that? I think in time, I don't think she'll be quite ready yet. Once again, it's got to be evidential, and it's got to actually be with a member of her family, so it gives the actual facts, and that nobody else would know.
Absolutely. You can't channel it out of nothing. People that say, I've got so and so with me. I've got Queen Elizabeth with me. You can't say that. You have to have the person with you to confirm it. So you have to, like Jane says, you have to have someone from that royal family with you. So, I'm sure we could probably get a communication from the Queen, but it would have to be for Charles, and it would be very private. It wouldn't be something for public consumption, and that's the only way that sort of thing could really work. And I'm sure the Queen would do that the Queen was religious in a different way. She was very traditional Christian religion, and I don't think she in her life was fascinated in the same way her grandmother was with the was a great grandmother from Victoria was.
The Queen Mother was, Craig. I know that for a fact.
Queen Mother was interested. Yes.
I know that for a fact because I knew the butlers.
Yeah,
so
we know
for a fact.
Yeah, we know that for a fact. And there was a few others that were involved with it. She saw Simone Simmons as well, didn't she?
She was a healer. She wasn't a medium.
Diana was interested in all types of things. She was interested in the spiritual world generally. She enjoyed the healing. She also saw a couple of astrologers too. Debbie Frank was one that she saw.
And Penny Thornton.
Yeah, both very good astrologer, I believe. I always heard good reports of both of them. And she was also very interested in...
I'm wondering if she ever had a Naadi reading, because she was very much in love with an Indian doctor, heart doctor, and that's the one that she really loved. But he didn't want all the press around him because he's very dedicated to his work and she fell for him because she thought he was a compassionate man.
Yeah, Naadi was never found. I've talked about the Naadi's people. I talked to Kim about that. Had Diana's Naadi ever been found?
Right.
Because in the Naadi it might have warned her about her death and helped her avoid it. But no, it wasn't.
But
she was never looked for.
She had a premonition, though, wasn't she, that she was going to die?
Yeah, of course. Diana was also interested in osteopaths, wasn't she, and acupuncturists and colonic irrigation. Ooh. The lady that I saw I gave a reading for, and Diana came through for her and gave proof by giving that pillbox thing.
Sarah, why would Rita Rogers have told Diana to avoid going to Paris or warn about an accident? Well, I've got to say with that, you have to use your own free will. Not every clairvoyant or medium are going to tell somebody you're going to die, because it's not in our hands.
And she might not have seen it anyway, had she?
No, she might not have.
People think that we as clairvoyants can see everything and know everything, but you can't. No.
You can't. You can't stop world events. You can't stop accidents. If you saw an illness with somebody, if they had abnormal cancer cells, say a woman, you would advise them to go to a doctor. You wouldn't say you're going to die on a particular day. You try to help them. But that was different. Rita Rogers was there when Diana needed her and guided her, and I believe that Diana trusted her.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things, because if you're a public figure, you need to know that the people you're dealing with will keep your confidentiality.
That's
right. People that have come to see us. I mean, we've seen lots and lots of people whose names we've never even mentioned. We only ever mention people that we've done worked with on television or things like that. So it's a no, and it's out in the public forum already. But when people come to see us, we obviously have to keep the strictest confidence. And that's why I say I was impressed by some of the mediums that didn't even mention the fact that they'd been Diana's confidants. And yet there was others that will make a huge trumpet every few minutes that Diana was their client, and make a big deal out of it. So, it worries me.
Lizzie says Diana went to see Sai Baba. I don't know that, but I know Sarah Ferguson went to see Swami.
I think it was Sarah Ferguson.
It's Sarah Ferguson.
I'm not yeah.
I don't think Diana did. It was Sarah Ferguson that went.
And King Charles was planning to see Sai Baba too.
Okay.
But it was stopped. And then there was that big BBC and news expose about it, saying that Charles is going to be tricked into go and see this weird man in India, because there was a whole load of stuff that they were exposing Sai Baba, which was a lot of nonsense if you actually do follow that through. But there was, and Charles was interested in it as well, But I don't think it ever happened in the end. It didn't come about.
Well, probably it wasn't meant to happen. Things only happen if they're meant to happen. And you can't really sit and demand anything from the spirit world and click your fingers, because people say, could you bring Michael Jackson through us. I'm afraid not. Could you bring Marilyn Monroe through? I'm afraid not. You've got to personally know them, not because you're a fan. It don't work like that.
Will Merlin make a return to court life once William Arthur Wales is on the throne? Merlin was a fascinating character as well, actually. He's probably mythical when you look at the stories. I remember he comes up in not just the stories from Wales and England, but he's also in the stories of France and places like that. He's a kind of a mythical figure in many ways. The Gandalf that was rewritten into the Lord of the Rings all comes from Merlin. He was a very magical sort of character, probably an amalgamation of many of the seers of the time and the Druid and pre-Druid sort of pagan sort of teachers. So would he make a return? Would Arthur come again? This is what the story says, that England would rise to power again when Arthur returns. And here we are sat in Winchester, which is supposed to have been Camelot. It was the most likely place that was Camelot, because it was the centre of Wessex, which was because England didn't unite to become England for a long time. There was Mercia and all the rest, and the Viking lands and everything, Norfolk and things, all different countries. So Arthur was the king of Wessex. So if he comes again, it's going to come here to Winchester. He would return, wouldn't he? He'd come back to his land of his former self. Maybe I'm Arthur, reborn.
I don't think so.
And I'm going to save England.
Right, I answer this.
We need someone like that.
Catherine says, in the medium Sally Morgan's book, she said something about telling Princess Diana about her death, which was a funeral like the Queen Mother's, and Diana had equal funeral to the Queen's mother. Well, I know nothing about that, I'm afraid.
No, I've not read any of
so
her
I
work,
can't answer that.
I mean, it's been so questioned, her stuff, though, hasn't it? Really?
Yeah.
So it's difficult
Because you couldn't
comment.
possibly have Princess Diana phone you several times in the day, because she'd be having other commitments, wouldn't she?
Well, she did phone a lot of
Yeah,
things.
but she would, I think when she phoned psychics, that's when she had troubled times and that, and just needed reassurance.
She was
and
phoning
everything.
psychics by the dozen.
Yes.
She was picking the phone up and just calling, and she was, and this is why it was so out of control, because the security services. I mean, Diana was. I mean, I was, that lady again who I did the reading for with Diana, said that Diana was absolutely horrified by it. She thought she was being watched all the time by MI5. Well, she was, because they were worrying that she was a security risk also to herself, because she was just calling people randomly. I mean, she's a very emotional lady, and she wanted to get off her chest, so she was calling the lines all the time. She didn't know who she was speaking to. And we often on the lines we didn't know if it was her or not. It sounded like Diana, and it was Diana sometimes. Sometimes she said it was. So it was difficult, really, and she was using different phones all the time. She was using burner phones.
It's a well-known fact, and it's proven that Princess Diana went to see Rita Rogers, because we have a photograph of her getting out the helicopter and going into Rita's house, and she's given Rita a gold necklace and also pieces of Crown Derby the daughters had, and that's proven. So she gave something special, and as Craig says, when somebody's quite troubled, they'll try any different avenues, but it's a well-known fact that she did contact a load of mediums and clairvoyants.
Yeah, and just talk about that one from Tintagel there.
Oh.
Yeah, they do. Tintagel makes a claim to Arthur, but they think that Tintagel was probably much later than Arthur, so it probably didn't. And there's also claims in Wales, of course, to Arthur as well, that he may have been Welsh, might not have been British at all, English in the sense, like I said, it was all multiple countries then. So yeah, the roots of Arthur are quite difficult to know. And of course, there's all many of the romantic sort of Mort d'Arthur book and things like that, and Rackham's pictures and all the rest of it of Arthur. It's become romanticised by the pre-Raphaelites and everybody else.
I think King Arthur will return again.
There's a lot of evidence to say that Arthur was
real. He will
real.
return.
In fact, two Arthurs from two different generations.
Yeah, that feels right.
Well, I think he probably was. I mean, we don't know for certain. I mean, we went round Cornwall too, where to the lake
sword.
where he's supposed to have thrown the sword back into the lake. and it's caught by the Lady of the Lake.
That's
Right. They found no sword in there, but it was certainly a fascinating place. And the thoughts are, he could have. There's places in Anglesey, which was a very ancient settlement of ancient Britain. And there were sacred lakes there where they found, in the lakes, they found many things. There were people who used to throw items into the lakes way back in history. It was to the gods you would throw stuff into the lake. So it would have been quite likely that Arthur would have, the sword would have been thrown back into the lake and given back to the gods, which was an old idea from that time. And that would probably have been Anglesey. So the claims to the myth are all over the place. And I think what makes it even more fascinating, really, doesn't it? But like when we went to some of those places, we'll have to put the videos up sometimes. When we went to some of those places in Cornwall and that, there was a real sense of being connected to those ancient times, particularly that lake, I thought, where there was nobody there.
Absolutely.
Just an obscure lake in the middle of nowhere. And I felt that seemed to have a ring of that.
We're going to Rome soon, so we'll be filming under the catacombs, won't we?
We don't. I'm not necessarily booked in the catacombs yet, but we're going to go to Rome soon. Yeah, so we'll bring back. So hopefully we'll have. We won't probably have to. You'll want to go shopping when we go to Rome. So
he won't. He want to go to restaurants.
I want to go.
But I've already worked out where the shops are. No, we will go down the catacombs because Danielle wants to do that.
Yeah, imagine having a séance in one of those palaces with all that history around.
Yeah, wonderful, isn't it?
I mean, we did the séances for Princess Diana, you remember. We've spoken about that quite a few times on the programme. And that was in quite a good historic place next to St Paul's Cathedral. But it would be lovely to, imagine doing... I'd love to do some readings with somebody from the royal family in one of those places and the ancient history and feel the ancient kings and queens of England come near. It must be a great honour to do that type of work, Lovely, lovely work to do. And fascinating because, and this is where Nostradamus as well made his name, didn't he? Queen Elizabeth as well, I think, wasn't it? Because if you're the monarch, you're going to think about the future, not just of your reign. You're going to think about the future of what's to come of your nation because you're there for the nation. And no wonder they saw so many seers right the way back. When you go right back, we went back to Delphi, didn't we? But you could go right the way back to the ancient Sumerians and the first civilizations, and even of course, in India too, and in China, that all the emperors and all the leaders and kings of old all looked to the seers, and even the three wise men.
Even Hitler had one.
Hitler, yeah, we could do a whole separate program on Hitler. Actually, I'm really fascinated by his interest in the occult, and indeed, so was Churchill, because Churchill said, "Oh well, I'm only interested in it because Hitler is. We can anticipate what he's going to do."
Ronald Reagan's wife, Nancy, she used to be very interested in astrology and give advice to Ronald Reagan through an astrologer.
Yeah, she did, and that was with
Jean Dixon.
No, not Jean Dixon. I'm thinking of here. Shirley MacLaine. We got all involved in that time, wasn't it, as well?
No,
it kind of opened up the whole age.
I'm talking about a medium clairvoyant. Shirley MacLaine wasn't a medium clairvoyant.
No, but she was also involved with that whole set. With
She's
Reagan
an actress,
and that, I believe. But it was throughout the ages. We wonder who now consults the psychics, properly, and the mediums. It's probably quite difficult for them to find people nowadays because, it seems like everybody wants to expose it to the press as soon as it happens. Even Gorbachev, Mikhail Gorbachev, he consulted. I think it might have been. I'm not quite sure who he saw. Some say it's Baba Vanga. But I don't think it was. I think it was somebody that read the sugar cubes he read. There was apparently in Russia, there was a thing about reading sugar cubes, and it foresaw the fall of the Iron Curtain. Mm-hmm. So Gorbachev, it was all over the psychic news at the time.
Oh, well, I didn't see that.
Yeah, Gorbachev was fascinated by it, So who knows who's consulting who nowadays, Did Putin go and consult anybody? I doubt it. Xi Jinping, would he consult anybody?
No.
I don't think Trump would. Don't think Biden would be capable of it. I can't think of any. Yeah, some of the leaders did though, and also it's similarly in the Second World War there was a lot of
King of Thailand
interest in it too. King of Thailand, I think.
Yes, King of Thailand.
And the King
would.
of Bhutan's very
Yes.
interested in it all, I believe, too.
That's right.
You know, there's lots of spiritual things that go on deeply in the background there, yeah. I have seen orbs under the Colosseum. Well, yes, I expect you probably would. We've been round the Colosseum a few times. Well,
And
once or twice.
Well, when I went round it, all I had was a vibration of smelling blood. I smelt fresh blood when I was
that
walking around
Colosseum,
it.
what an energy that
And I
has.
could feel that. And then I saw the outside of it in my vision, all covered in white marble.
Yeah,
And
it was all covered in
was
marble.
it was all,
originally, yeah,
and then
yeah.
I saw
It was
fire.
quarried.
And you picked up all sensation in that, because those places got residue energy and you could pick it up.
Yeah.
And couldn't say it's a happy place to go and visit.
No, and do you think that the Vatican was built from the marble taken from the Colosseum? That's
Oh.
where Michelangelo got the marble from. They stripped
So
the
secret
Colosseum of its marble
documents.
to build the Vatican. And yes, definitely the Vatican must have some incredible secret documents.
Of course they have.
I mean, there was a great story. I can't remember what it was.
Where's Christ's spear? Where Christ's spear went, and that's meant to be hidden
That's
under
not
there.
in the Vatican. That's in Austria.
No, but
But
there
they
is.
think
There
the one
is.
in Austria was replaced by a fake.
No,
Hitler
but the
took
real
Spear of
one
Destiny.
is in the
sword of
Vatican.
Lonicus. Yeah.
And
No,
there is, Craig.
Vatican
a lot.
haven't got it.
There's a lot of Roman things and
The
secret
Spear
things.
of Lonicus, according to the story, was in a museum in Austria, in Vienna. When Hitler went into Vienna, one of the first things he did was take the Spear of Lonicus. Have I got the name right? Anyway, the soldier that put the spear into the side of Christ. And whoever holds the spear holds the destiny of the world. And when Hitler fell, they reckon it fell into the hands of the
Can I
Americans.
just move that
and Patton
spear a
took
minute,
it.
Craig?
Yeah, Lord Patton took it. But they think the one that was put back into the museum was a fake, and now that America holds the Spear of Destiny. But, you know, this is all up subject to speculation.
Well, when we went into a church by the Vatican, they had all the Pope's fingers that were cut off, and they all had rings on. Do you remember that great big jar?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
all bones and things.
Agility bits. Did Richard III communicate his whereabouts from the grave? Richardian Philip Langley said that she felt a tinge go up her spine when she walked across the grave, and that's exactly where he was found. Yeah.
He was found in a car park, wasn't he?
Yeah, I remember some Americans saying, "Why bury a king in a car lot?"
Wow.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, also around here in Winchester, the body of Alfred the Great was, I'm not quite sure what's happened to it now, but I don't think we have the body of Alfred the Great. But he was originally buried just literally down the road here in Hyde Street.
Didn't they say there's some barrows or something that there's got some relics and things in they've discovered?
Yeah.
The secret, I was reading that.
I mean, archaeologists have used dowsing, for example. I mean,
Yeah.
I worked those times with those archaeologists. Remember, when I did some of those TV programs. But it's archaeologists have often used dowsers and things, and Troy was discovered using dowsing. You know, they used dowsing to locate Troy. They didn't know where Troy was, and they found it by dowsing. It was also used in some of the excavations in Egypt as well, and that, you know, these paranormal sort of techniques have been used quite a lot to find ancient places, including graves and things like that. You know, so us psychics are going to be useful for the future for those type of things. So we're coming to the end of the show, and I would ask again, don't forget before you go, guys, do consider being a patron, because we do very much need your support. We are running this on an absolute shoestring here in Winchester, so we need a few more patrons so we can keep it going. So we'd be really, really grateful for those that support the channel to consider just helping us keep this show on the road like this with the studio here by making a small donation or a larger donation on a regular donation as a patron. It's commonly done by a lot of the channels, but this helps keep the studio going, helps us to keep the show alive, and helps us do our spiritual work generally. Don't go into our pocket, it helps support the studio. So do please have a look after us and consider being a patron. We do put lots of extras on there. We do have little chats with people on there, and we're going to be doing a little 5-minute afterwards of this where we put a little extra at the end of the show on the Patreon channel. And also, some of you might also consider becoming one of the YouTube followers too. So anyway, well, thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll do a little 5-minute one after this for the patrons.
I was wondering. I
Folks,
was wondering, Craig.
Matt's there with his finger on the button.
Yeah, I was wondering, Craig, is somebody joined tonight, a patron, and it was a considerable amount of money, then I'm offering a free reading to them.
You've made that unclear, Jane.
Well, you clear it up then, Craig.
Save that for another one. I'll tell you what we will do. I was thinking it would be nice if you and me did a patron readings evening, and we just patrons only.
Well, I'd like to.
We can do it on Zoom.
I like the person in front of me.
Yeah. Well, okay, but they have to come all the way. You throw these things at the last minute.
Exciting, though, isn't it? Exciting.
Okay. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye for now.
But I just feel she's in a better place.
I agree.
Better place. And so one has to feel, my darling, your wishes come true.
And he's given me the feeling that at the end, there's something I put into the coffin with him, he's saying here, something that was very emotionally significant to you. And you wrote something that was poetic with it, because I feel as if I put something poetic. It's only a stanza of a verse. It's about 4 lines.
Oh, that's true. Both these people, everything they said about the stuff they talked about, they were accurate. They are the real deal. And it kind of blew my mind a little bit. I'm not a mind blower, by nature, but it was real. And all crap aside, it was real.
Fascinating. Remember, our psychic mediums have never met the people in these circles and know nothing about them. While the crew sets up for Craig's seance, let's see what the participants of Jane's seance thought of what just happened.
Well, I suppose I wasn't really quite sure what to expect when I came. It was different.
It was interesting to me to find out that Diana came across so strongly as knowing what I was doing. And that came across very clearly in what she said to me. And that she was there and that she knew the work I was doing. That was quite powerful for me. Even the one who calls himself a cynic was very much part of it.
I found it terribly hard to relate the Diana I knew to being a spirit. And I used to see her regularly, sometimes 3 times a week, sometimes twice a day. And I'm a shocking cynic, but I did feel something during that. And there were 1 or 2 things that came out which only Diana and I perhaps knew. So perhaps I'm not quite so cynical.
Another remarkable seance. I wonder if the people at Craig's seance will be as convinced and enthusiastic as those who sat at Jane's. Let's find out.
It was very interesting, though, and it was very nice to see how everybody else was going, hey, yeah, wow. That was kind of cool that happened, too, because nobody had any idea who was who and what was what, so there was nothing set up, and we knew nothing that was going to happen next. So.
I found it fascinating.
Certainly the questions that were being put to us, or the comments that were made to us. If your memory was 100%, you could remember every one of those occasions that he spoke about, right down to the nitty-gritty in the kitchens with the children. It all made sense,
And the pear drops were definitely something. I mean, we used to buy them specially and have them in the office so that she could have them whenever she wanted them. And it was always, don't tell anybody, I'm not supposed to have these, So that was fantastic. It actually blew my mind.
There was a contact there on everything he said.